Sorry, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think I hand that to you, Albert.
Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome everybody. I hope you're doing well in these difficult times. I hope you're doing well. So could you please give me an answer if you're doing well in the chat? I want to get you in some active mode immediately. Okay, you're doing fine. Excellent, excellent. Doing good. Ready for the lockdown to be over though, I can imagine. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Okay, thank you for your answers. As you might remember, my name is Albert Kraai. You only saw me at the introduction. I am the lecturer who does the group work starting next week. We're going to create a social enterprise together, or you in a group with me, hopefully helping. Georgina, as you probably know, had to leave for Belgium today because she had to go to the funeral of her father-in-law. So our condolences go to Georgina. And she asked me to step in and introduce the guest lecturer for today. And that guest lecturer is a very special person because it's a colleague of mine. It's a colleague at the Hague University of Applied Science. It's Dennis Petrie. He will introduce himself shortly. I have one question for you. Next week, we're going to do group work. And I have, in order to be efficient in that group work or effective, you need to get to know your group members. And I have an idea. And maybe it's an innovative idea, it could be a stupid idea, and I'd like to discuss that with you after this guest lecture. So hope you stay on after the lecture. But now, without further ado, I'd like to give the podium to Mr. Dennis Petrie, and he will introduce himself first. Dennis, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Albert, and also thank you, Georgina, for inviting me to give this guest lecture. It's a pleasure to be working together on this very important module on local development. Just to confirm, is the screen visible that I'm sharing? Yeah. Okay. So I was asked to say a few things about the role of faith-based organizations as actors in local development, and I gave my talk a subtitle that will become clear towards the end: religious literacy to promote local development, effective local development. So I actually want to present a few notions, a few examples, and mainly I hope that my talk will serve as a trigger for a group discussion. I think that's the best way we can work together today. Just to introduce myself quickly. So I am indeed a lecturer at the Hague University. I also lecture at a Costa Rican university called the Latin American University of Science and Technology. I am a dual citizen of two countries, of Mexico and the Netherlands, but I've been living in Costa Rica for quite some time. Actually, I divide my time between Costa Rica and the Netherlands. Well, I've done quite some research on different topics, including the relation between religion and politics and religious freedom. I also run a small charity called the Foundation Platform for Social Transformation. And an important program of that charity is the Observatory of Freedom in Latin America. So that should give you an idea of my background. And so in a way, I'm both an academic and a practitioner. I'm really always been interested in working in the political dimension of development cooperation. So there you go. And here's my email address in case you would like to ask me any questions. I also would like to take this opportunity to quickly mention my most recent book that's called The Specific Vulnerability of Religious Minorities, which includes case studies of 3 religious groups in Latin America, because Latin America really is the region I focus on, and most examples I will be talking about today will also be based on my experience in this region. So I just would like to mention this. If you're interested, send me an email in this book and I can send you a copy. I also refer you to the Observatory of Religious Freedom in Latin America, which contains a lot of information about religious freedom in the region that we work hard to keep up to date. So this is the promotional part of my talk. Now let's get into the subject matter. So outline, first I want to start out by discussing the marginal interest in religion in the social sciences. And this is not just a theoretical issue, it has consequences because it leads to the neglect of religion in development. And some of those consequences are that the needs and concerns of religious groups are not considered, which is obviously a problem from a human rights perspective. But more importantly, I think the contribution of religious groups to development is not sufficiently recognized because of this. And there's a huge potential that, as we will see. And of course, the role of religion in society is very important, but I think it's important, it's necessary that we just go back to it and explain why religion it plays such an important role. And then we can go into the importance of religious literacy and justify it as a key dimension to conceptualize effective development strategies. And the reason is that FBO, faith-based organizations, make distinct contributions to local development. And I also would like to present a couple of promising ways forward. Just mention those because I think they could be of interest to you. So, but first of all, we all know when we talk about development, of course, the international framework that international experts agreed upon at the moment are the Sustainable Development Goals, which are 17 goals that were defined at the UN level, which it's quite a lot to have 17 goals, right? When you set goals, normally you have 2 or 3 goals. These are 17, but this is of course the result of this international negotiation where everyone wanted to have their own goals included. But nevertheless, it's a beautiful list of objectives for development. And there's 2 things that are very interesting about these development goals. One is that they were developed with the contribution of many religious organizations, many faith-based organizations were involved in the development of these goals, and so that's noteworthy. But what's also noteworthy is that none of those goals are actually related to religion or take religious dimensions into account. And so those religious organizations made their contributions to these discussions, but at the same time, wanted to be neutral. And I guess neutrality is a positive thing, but then there's also specific contributions that religious organizations can make that are directly related to religion that are not very visible in these Sustainable Development Goals. So just mentioned this. Now let's go into the marginal interest in religion in social sciences, and this is just a quick overview of the literature about this. But in general, this is what we can say, that social sciences has ignored religion and religious studies and the religious dimension of many things, many areas for a long time. So first of all, this can be connected to the influence of Marx's reductionist approach to religion. You'll remember Karl Marx said that religion is the opium for the people. And that's all religion is. You know, it's an instrument to manipulate and oppress the working class, the labor classes, right? And that's Marx's vision. And this could be true in some cases, but there's much more to religion than just being an instrument of oppression, right? Okay. Then there's this tradition in classical liberalism to confine religion to church-state matters. So whenever there was research about religion in social sciences, it was related to the relation between church and the state, and whether the church was dominating the state or the state was dominating the church. But really, that's just one tiny dimension of religion, of course. And then, of course, there's also this predominance of secularization theory. There was this theory in sociology that well, the world, when it reaches a stage of modernization, will become more secular, and religion will start playing a less important role in society, and that really dominated academic discussions on religion for decades, really. And in part, it was wishful thinking. People were actually hoping that religion would disappear from the public sphere, and that's really not what happened, and actually was challenged quite visibly by the September 11 terror attacks and this trend of radical Islamic revivalism in recent years. But that just brought religion back to the stage, and definitely proved that secularization theory was wrong. Religion is not going away, and that's actually, but it was very influential. And then, of course, there's another aspect that's not very often noticed, but there's declining levels of personal religiosity of academic staff. And so when academics are not religious themselves, they have a hard time understanding religion. And that's also reality, and that also contributes to explain the marginal interest in religion in social sciences. Okay, now this neglect has consequences for development, as I already announced. So what are those consequences? Well, first, of course, there can be talk of an ontological injustice. So this is maybe a bit of a technical term, but essentially this idea of secularization essentially subordinates the secular worldview, the religious worldviews to secular worldviews, and so to the secular worldview, and so religious perspectives are not taken into consideration. It actually contradicts the main tenet of liberalism, which is that all views should have the freedom to be expressed, but somehow religious worldviews are less considered. So that's conceptually, ontologically an injustice, but it also leads to religious illiteracy. And so what is religious illiteracy? It means that whether it's academics, journalists, policymakers, individuals, they don't get religion. They don't understand why religion is important and what it is and what role it plays in society. And of course, that is problematic because it does play an important role in society, and therefore you cannot really understand what's going on in society. And so if you don't understand religion, you cannot operationalize religion as an academic, understand it, define it, develop variables, etc. But it also has consequences for policymakers, right? Because, well, it leads to blind spots in empirical observation, very important blind spots. Everything related to religion is just not taken into consideration. But it's also an obstacle to evidence-based policymaking and development planning. Why? Because, as I said, religion is an important part of society. And so if religious aspects are not taken into account, then the key word right now is evidence-based policymaking. But if it's not based on all the evidence, then of course those policy initiatives and development projects will not sufficiently be informed, right, by the right notions. So those are a couple of consequences of the neglect of religion for development. And so, well, what happens when the needs and concerns of religious groups are not considered? I'll just give a few examples, mainly from my experience in Latin America. First of all, very recent example is the public health measures to combat COVID-19. Right? They have led to serious restrictions of religious freedom. And of course, there were health measures, but there were many restrictions on freedom of worship, and many houses of worship were closed, and because of the pandemic. And of course, you could say, well, it's necessary because we need to deal with the pandemic, and I guess that's true. But maybe a little more sensitivity to the needs of and concerns of religious groups would have been in order. I mean, there's been very serious restrictions on the humanitarian work that religious groups do with migrants, for example, on the US-Mexican border, and those things, well, are quite important. And there's been police interventions in religious services in Brazil. So those are really striking images, right? So a little more sensitivity to the needs of religious groups would have been in order. So that's one example. Another example is the zoning laws. When we're talking about urban planning at the local level, because this module is about local development. Well, there is often in many countries a prohibition for the establishment of places of worship in residential areas. But places of worship actually need to be in residential areas because those religious groups, they want to be close to the people, right? But generally, there's prohibitions for all kinds of planning reasons, and so churches and mosques and synagogues end up being located in commercial areas or in industrial areas, and that's not ideal also from the perspective of safety. So you got that. There's of course also this misguided idea of separation of church and state. Don't understand religion. There's many policies trying to exclude religion from the public sphere based on this interpretation of the separation of church and state, which is a very important, necessary principle, but it must not be misguided and understood as an exclusion of religious views in public debate. And then there's secularization theory, which is related to all those these concepts of the notions that religion is dangerous and promoting terrorism, etc., and that has informed also quite some policies, especially in Western Europe. So those things are problematic. Then we go to the contribution of religious groups to development when they're not recognized, and here I don't really need to give too many examples, but religious groups have been very active throughout the years in education, in health, in humanitarian work, in democratization, in human rights. I mean, there's been a very, very strong contribution. I mean, the development of the world actually was driven to a large extent by the work of religious organizations and religious charities. And for a very long time, schools and hospitals were run by religious organizations. The state started stepping in only recently, and so this is important to recognize this aspect. And of course, and there's some very noteworthy examples of activists that have really made a contribution to change in society, like Martin Luther King, for example, or Monsignor Romero in El Salvador. Those were really people that were driven by their religious convictions, but really made a difference. And so it's I think relevant to recognize those contributions. I've done quite some work myself with political dissidents in Cuba, and really the main opposition in Cuba are religious organizations, and they are essentially the dissidents to the regime. So that's very important. And there's more examples I can talk about. Religious groups have a very strong local presence, especially when the state is absent, when the state fails. Actually, in Mexico, the Mexican government made an express call to religious organizations to help them rebuild the social tissue to combat organized crime, because they realized that they could not deal with all the drug trafficking and everything. They needed the help of religious organizations. And this is just one example among many. So what can we say about the role of religion in society? Well, there's a lot that can be said, but just real quickly, I'll finish with this. First of all, of course, 80% of the world population is religious. That's probably the main reason that religion plays an important role in society. But then there's all kinds of philosophical contributions. There's this idea that Durkheim stresses, that religions provide a sense of collective consciousness, a set of shared norms and values. It's the glue that provides that keeps society together. It's a source of social cohesion, right? And Putnam actually speaks of the bridging function of religion as well. That religions and religious people have this extra capacity to establish connections. Again, it's a source of social cohesion. I'm not saying that non-religious people don't have this capacity, but it's noteworthy for religion. And then Max Weber famously also cites religion as a source of legitimacy, of authority, which can also be problematic. But in general, there's also this notion of social cohesion. And then there's also this idea that the concept of civil society actually emerged in religion. Professor Buijs of Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam speaks of this old Greek notion of agape that's actually finds its origin in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Well, he actually is very radical, and he claims that civil society as a concept could only emerge in religion, right? From religion, and so, well, that's quite extreme, but it's just to underline the importance, the important role of religion in society. So, and for this reason, I believe that religious literacy is essential. This is really my conclusion today. It's religious literacy, so understanding what religion is about, is a key dimension to conceptualize effective development strategies. It's a moral imperative, first of all, because well, it's necessary to recognize this sociological reality. 80% of the world population is religious, but it's also necessary to take the specific needs of religious people into consideration and materialize this important human right called religious freedom. That's why I think this is a moral imperative, but it's also essential for evidence-based policy making. So I already mentioned that it's necessary to take the specific needs of religious groups into consideration, act upon human rights violations related to religion, and more generally inform policy making. And that's key. And of course, also avoid costly mistakes, because there's this notion that people who have a strong commitment to justice, and many religious people have a strong commitment to justice, right? They are vulnerable, and that's what Martha Nussbaum calls the fragility of goodness, and it's important to protect those people, right? Otherwise, we will be making very costly mistakes and actually hindering, development, democratization, human rights, because many, I'm not saying most, but many human rights activists are actually have a religious focus and religious convictions. And then, of course, we need to harness the contribution of religious groups to development. There's huge potential there. I think it's obvious, but there's really a lot that we can benefit from, right? So, and so finally, distinct contribution of FBOs as active local development. It's a reservoir of altruism and resilience. Religious groups are more suited to help other minorities. There's research that proves that minorities are actually more inclined to help other minorities. Then there's this idea that FBOs can be more effective in some areas because they go to the local level where states fails. They've got this bridging capacity, as I already mentioned. And oh, this repeats. Yeah. Okay. So and so some promising ways forward. I just want to mention two examples, and then I'll turn it over to you. I hope I remain within the time, Albert. But there's this very interesting case in the municipality of Manizales, which is a municipality in the center of Colombia, where an interreligious participation mechanism was set up. So it's a social dialogue function with representatives of different religious organizations, and they're actively involving those religious groups in municipal in policy making. So there's policy. All policy topics are being discussed, and religious organizations or the representatives of those religious organizations can give their input, provide their feedback, and actively contribute to those to those policies. And so it's and it works very well, because it not only allows to involve those religious organizations in policy making and benefit from their insights, etc. It also allows to take into consideration their specific needs. For example, and that's how they found out that with urban planning and the zoning regulations I mentioned, that was actually creating problems for religious groups, and their needs were not taken into consideration. But also, it's actually a very good model to prevent religious conflict. And overall improve the quality of public policy. So that's a very promising way forward, I would like to mention. And another one is that religion is increasingly included on the agenda of international cooperation. So there's a project by the US Agency for International Development that I'm involved in now, called Closing the Gap, that is really looking at the relation between religion, religious freedom, political stability, and economic development. And the objective is to formulate recommendations so that US development cooperation can include more the religious dimension of things in their economic development projects and also peace building projects. So these are just two promising ways forward I would like to mention, with the objective of just underlining the important role of FBOs as actors in local development. I think I'll leave it here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for your presentation. Well within time. Excellent. Thank you. So we have some time left for a Q&A. So if there are any students who would like to ask Mr. Dennis Petrie a question about his presentation, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, my name is Sandra. GDP major from Ghana. Okay, listening to your presentation is quite interesting, very, very interesting. And I see that faith-based organizations play a very key role in development. Now, my question is, in this era of this secularization theory, where we have religion gradually losing its essence because of science and then the technology around us, how do we now integrate science and religion for people to believe more in religion, to include faith-based organizations in development?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question, and that's of course a very, very good question, and it's not a question that I can easily solve, but of course you could say in a way that science is also a religion in a way, but I think I'm not sure I'm able to answer this question quite frankly. There are really times that science and religion contradict each other, and there's of course religious people who refuse to accept certain scientific principles. That is all very true on the one hand. On the other hand, there's also, I think we think that there's not necessarily competition between religion and science. That there are two fields that actually are they're two separate fields. That's all. Yeah, they're two distinct fields. Religion speaks to the supernatural, whereas science speaks to physics, right? So they're not necessarily in competition with each other. But I just want to make a very general point, and that is that religion is real, right? And it plays an important role in society, and so it needs to be taken into consideration. Whether religious groups adhere to scientific principles or not, and actually, when you look at economic development, there's many areas where disagreements on science are perhaps not that relevant, right? So you can have many different perspectives, but in the end, if people can agree on the necessity of a humanitarian intervention, for example. So that's also a way to look at it. But I realize I'm not. I may not answer your question satisfactorily. Yeah.
Okay. I had a question. Excuse me. Okay. Hello, good afternoon, sir. Yeah, my name is Basia Wanusoro. I'm SJP Major, and I'm from Nigeria. Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. And we've learned so much. We've seen how marginal interest has been in religion. And we learned that there are about 80% world population that are religious. I want to ask, sir, as important as it is, and having enumerated all the good things that religion has contributed, is there anything about religion that is inimical to development? Why are people not, why are they not taking into it? Why, if it is this important, why are they not taking interest? And why is it not in the forefront of researchers? You also mentioned of religious illiteracy. Why are they not being researched about and making people know much about it, how important religion is to development? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. It's actually two questions, I think. So the first question is about the lack of research on the relation between religion and development, and that's your second question, actually. Yeah? Well, I tried to explain that. A large problem is related to the Marxist vision of religion, the liberal vision of religion, secularization theory. Those are all elements that explain why there has been such little interest in religion and religion development. And it's only in recent years that research started. And actually, one of the I think it's very positive that we're having this discussion now in an academic setting about the role of religion in development, and that should be done much more. But it has been neglected because there was this idea that religion is backwards. Right? In the modern world, we don't need religion. Right? Religion is something that belongs to the past, to archaic societies. But in modernity, we don't need religion, and religion is going away. And that was a mistake. That was really a mistake, and it also does not do justice to the important contribution of religion to development. So I think it's key that we recognize the importance of this, that we put it on the agenda, but it's already changing a little bit. In the past 10, 15, 20 years, more research is being done on the contribution of religion to development. But it's very difficult when academic staff does not value this importance and also is religiously illiterate, right? So that makes it difficult. But we need to work towards that. So that's one thing, and put it on the agenda and teach more about it, right? And include that kind of subjects in university curricula, etc. Now, on your other question about the negative dimensions of religion, there of course is a big problem with religion. And religion is many things. It's many good things. It's many bad things as well. I've emphasized the positive contribution of religion, but there's also negative contributions. The religion has inspired a lot of violence, throughout the the history of humanity. Religion has also been very contradictory to development. I mean, there's of course this radical group in Nigeria, Boko Haram, for example, is actually at its core opposed to economic development, opposed to education, right? That's what I understand Boko Haram means. So you don't only see that with Islamic groups, you also see that in Christian groups. There's also been a lot of obscurantism that has been promoted through by Christian groups. So there's all kinds of problems there, definitely. But I do think that in the end the positive benefits of religion outweigh the negative. But we need to focus on that. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Dennis. I'd like to give the word to Antoinette. She has even 2 questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to know more about the case you presented about Manizales, because I didn't know about it, so I would like to know more details about it. And the second one would be, maybe, what do you think about the case of cities like Rotterdam, or like here in the Netherlands, where religious participation was included, like in policy making at the beginning. When Turkish population arrived to Rotterdam, they were really open to religious participation, and the policy making process was also taking like considering the factor of religion. But it changed over time because of whatever happened, political issues, also like the experience of the cities. But I would like to know, because this contradicts a little bit what you said about maybe that religion was not considered in the policymaking process when people ignored those religious studies. But I think in the Netherlands it happened like the contrary. They are not a religious country, or they are in a Protestant context, but they actually took into account those factors when the first generation of Turkish labor was here in Rotterdam, that it's a super diverse city. So maybe I would just like to know how you see the case of cities like Rotterdam, and know more about the Manizales case.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your questions. So about the Manizales case, it's really a very, very interesting case. So basically, what's done is that they set up interreligious dialogue platforms. So that there's regular meetings where representatives of religious organizations come together and discuss public policy, right? And they're involved in policy making. And there's 2 platforms that they have right now. One really focuses on religious freedom and everything that's related to that. And the other focuses on urban planning. Because as I explained with the zoning laws, etc., there is a religious dimension, or religious people are affected by urban planning. So that's really the model. That it's not very complex in a way to set up. It's just that it's an advisory board to the municipal council and to the mayor of the city, and they discuss topics, give recommendations, provide ideas, also provide help for the implementation of public policy. So they're very much involved in shaping decision making. Of course, decisions are made by the municipal council, but they advise the municipal council, and it works quite well. People are quite happy about this model. And it's definitely something that could be replicated in other parts of the world. And the interesting part here is also that there's many fields of public policy that one would not expect they have a religious dimension, or they can affect religious concerns. but they do. I mean, what has urban planning got to do with religion, right? But as you can see, it does, and so it really contributes to a more democratic discussion. So and you know yeah, and I think that's what I can say about this right now. And regarding your question on Rotterdam, now I must confess I'm not 100% familiar with what's going on in Rotterdam. But I'm sure this initiative that you mentioned is functioning, and yeah, you're right to point out maybe that religion is not absent from policy making. You're probably right about that. I may have made a too absolute of a statement, but it may also be the exception that confirms the rule, right? So there are some initiatives here and there, but in general, I would say that religion is being ignored in policy making. So maybe Rotterdam is an exception. Maybe it works quite well. But I will say one thing. It is. We can see it is changing though. So in the past 10, 20 years, things are changing more and more, and these organizations are being involved more. But for example, when you look what I started out with, look at the Sustainable Development Goals. There's nothing, and which is a very important framework at the international level. There's no concern for religion whatsoever in the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's I think that comes to prove that we still need to go a long way in including the religious dimension of things in policy making and in development planning. Yeah.
I'd like to move on to. Are you both your questions answered, Antoinette?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll be moving on to Nanjala. Can you ask your question?
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, can we separate religion and politics? Because we've seen situations where religious leaders have taken up political positions, and we hope that they are going to carry on the vision of the religion to the politics side, but things change. So how far can we take this religion in terms of mixing it with politics?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So can we? So can we mix religion and politics and also religion and development? I think those are very similar questions. When all the examples I gave of religious organizations being involved in policy making, advising, etc., that's a positive contribution of religion to development and to public policy and to politics, therefore. And so there's no need for separation there. I will say this: very often the principle of separation of church and state or religion and state is misunderstood, right? Because the principle of separation of church and state, what it means is that churches should not have an undue influence on decision-making, political decision-making, and vice versa. The state should not have an involvement in the internal autonomy of churches. That's what the principle means. But it doesn't mean that religious groups cannot express their opinions, cannot make a contribution to political debate and to development matters. So there's two different things. If politics is subordinate to religion, that's a problem, right? That violates the principle of separation between church and state. But if religious organizations, just like any other civil society organizations, express their convictions on a particular topic, why would that be a problem? It can be very beneficial, as long as there's no subordination. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Next one, that is Krishna Nath.
Hi, your lecture was quite interesting, but coming from India, like really multi-religious land, I wanted to ask you, what exactly would be the motive of religion promoting local development? Like, what are they aiming at? At the end of the day, if a religious group is intervening in development policies, is it something out of a real motive to register some kind of development and give people the necessary skills, or promote their own religious interest and later translate it into a communal society?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think what we want, what we aspire to, first of all, is that we, I think there's three things, okay? One is that, of course, every religious group will try to promote their own interests, but we all do, you know what I mean? That's how politics works. Everyone has their opinions and wants to get them further, right, in politics. But I think there's three things we need to focus on. First, let's start with the negative. We need to find ways to prevent religious conflict, right? Religions always, there's always this potential for conflict, and so if we get them to talk to each other, that's always positive. So we only need to prevent religious conflict. That's the first. Second would be that we should take the specific needs of individual religious groups, individual religious minorities into consideration. That's a moral imperative, right? That's a human right. And third, and that's, I think, the positive contribution here, is that religious groups can make a very positive contribution to development. They already do, and they can do much more. And so we need to harness that contribution. So those would be the three goals I can come up with right now, to really associate religious groups with development and discussions about it.
Okay, thank you. We have two more questions. Hopefully we can do it a bit quickly. I think you all have next lessons at next lesson at 1 o'clock. So the last two questions. First, Nicole, can you ask a question?
Thank you, Dennis, for your presentation. I think my question is related to Krishna's question. I would like to ask, because there is a lot of division between different religions. So do you think maybe this also contribute to recognition of the contribution of religion to development? And my second question is that, what do you think could be a strategy to reinforce the network between the different religions? Because if there is a lot of population that has religion, and a lot of religions contribute to development, it could be like a better improvement for development if the religions join in a way.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. So I think the neglect of religion in social sciences is now being overcome, and there's increasingly more research about it, and also about the relation and the contribution of religion to development. In fact, to prepare for this lecture, Professor Georgina Gomez sent me an article that really stresses this. I think you could ask her for this article that really underlines that there's increasingly more research about the contribution of religion to development. So it is changing, and I think that is positive, but much more can be done, right? So let me say that. The other thing, the other question you asked is, well, yeah, religions should work together, but for that to happen, I think we should really promote the development of dialogue mechanisms, of channels of discussion, right? And just like was done in Manizales in Colombia, for example, or in Rotterdam. But so those platforms should be created channels for dialogue between religions, and they should be facilitated, I think, and we should invest in that much more, because that way we can really benefit from it. And also, another thing is we should eliminate obstacles for religious organizations to work in humanitarian projects. I mean, there's countries where it's illegal for religious organizations to operate charities. For example, in Cuba, and that's just not possible because of the communist ideology. And just the idea the state should take care of all social projects, but the state is failing, and the model isn't working, and so religious organizations want to do things, but they're not allowed to, right? So we need to remove those obstacles. But dialogue is always the answer, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question. I have a question for the group, especially for maybe Ernesto can answer. Do you have a lecture at 1 o'clock exactly?
I have a lecture.
Do you have a lecture at 1 o'clock? So should we stop at 1 o'clock exactly?
It depends on which major. I do have a meeting, but I don't know if the other majors of ISS.
Okay.
But it depends on each of us. We don't have the same calendar.
Thank you for your answer. That means that some of you will have a new lecture at 1 o'clock. So unfortunately, there are 2 questions who haven't been answered, and they're excellent. We can read them in the chat. Dennis, I will send you those questions so you can maybe you can give an answer in written for the last 2 questions. What I would like to do is to thank you for your very informative lecture. Yeah. It's a topic we all have strong feelings about. It's the fact in itself that we can have an open discussion about this, about the role of society in religion. I think that's prize-worthy in itself. So thank you so much for opening some insights into this specific topic. Maybe you can all give a applause, put on your microphone and give an applause for Mr. Petri.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Yeah, you've got my email address. I'm available for any questions. So yeah, it was a pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck with this this module.
Yeah.
Thank you, Albert,
Thank you,
and also thank you, Georgina, for inviting me.
Yeah.
And Bernardo, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. And we will forward you the questions. Maybe I see that in the chat, some people are posting the last question. So maybe we use these last 5 minutes to collect those questions so we can forward them to you. Thanks a lot. Indeed, very insightful session. Albert, you have something else to tell?
Yes, I have something to ask for the group. First, I want to apologize for the students who haven't been given a possibility to get an answer to the question. What I told you about in the beginning of the lecture, I want to organize something which will help you to meet each other. You're going to do group work, and group work only works if you know one another, not just do a project together, but also get a chance to know each other. Now we're in very, very difficult times. So what I'd like to propose is something that you can also say, I'm not quite comfortable with it. So my idea is to do a group walk outside using your telephone and WhatsApp. So when we create the groups for the group work, my idea is that you organize a walk together, go to the beach, go to somewhere else, and maybe some students are not able to be there, but they're asked to also do a walk outside somewhere else and then communicate through the WhatsApp group function. Yeah? This will give you an opportunity to get to know each other a bit better and also to get some exercise, because that's also very important in these times. So this is my innovative ideas. I'd like to hear your thoughts about it, positively or negatively, in the group chat. Yeah. So shoot. You can just shoot me if you want.
Can I say something?
Yes, Ernesto.
I have to go in 4 minutes, but I can propose a more traditional one, like is actually meeting real life for the ones that wants to. So if I'm in a group, I'm more than welcome to go to the beach, but in person. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, it's a beach walk, but you're not all in the Hague at this point in time. But it's a walk a few meters apart from one another. We have to be safe, but still we will see each other, connect through the telephone, and maybe some of you will actually be walking in Germany, for all I care, in the woods, but also will be joined on the WhatsApp. Yeah? Because you need to get to know one another. Otherwise, you can't build a proper business. It's all for the assignment, you know. Yeah. If you don't feel comfortable, don't feel obliged. It's not part of the curriculum. You won't be graded for the walk. It's just an idea, because I think we all, but it's based on the assumption that we all want to go out and talk to each other. Yeah. Okay. And also, I'm using that Georgina is not here, so I can test my idea without. She also was enthusiastic. Okay. I only see positive comments. So that means that next Friday, I will come up with proper instructions for the group work. Yeah. But again, if you're not feeling comfortable with it, we'll do something else. Yeah, we'll find another way. Yeah. But I think it's very important to get to know where you have a project with 2 universities and we only see each other on this crappy screen, this beautiful screen. Yeah. Okay. Only positive remarks so far. Then the last word is another thank you to Dennis and also to you. Thank you for joining here in this presentation. And good luck with all the rest of the activities. And I see you next Friday at the first work group meeting. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I wish you all a great weekend. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Fine weekend.
Thank you very much.
Happy weekend.